And welcome into our live Hoopsville courtside production. I am Dave McHugh, now joined by Mike DeWitt, the other way around, Coach. There we go, from Ohio Wesleyan. Trust me, he's in the frame shot. We'll get him in a little bit. He can look up. There you go. As Stevens Point beats Virginia Wesleyan in a thriller 68-59 in a terrific game. I think the key to the game, Coach, I don't know about you, was Richard inside for Stevens Point. He was just taking everyone to school.
Completely agree with you, Dave. And not just him, but I think a variety of Stevens Point players were able to finish inside and do a good job. And especially in the second half, they were able to get to the basket and either get to the free throw line or finish. And they got some easy baskets in the second half. But an impressive display by Stevens Point. They have so many guys who can do so many different things, and that's a nightmare for a coach to try to figure out a way to game plan to stop that.
We knew that this would be a battle. We knew the two defenses, Virginia Wesleyan's maybe underappreciated, certainly Stevens Point certainly understood, would have a battle. We also knew that both offenses would have their moments. It's not like Stevens Point doesn't have a good offense, they just don't need to use it. Yeah. Certainly Virginia Wesleyan's got a nice change of pace type offense. And throughout the game, we saw adjustment after adjustment after adjustment as both coaches tried to find something to either slow things down or get things back up to their pace.
The two great coaches, two great defensive teams in very different ways. Stevens Point, everyone knows about their defensive prowess, but I was so impressed with Virginia Wesleyan and how they're able to pressure the ball and cause Stevens Point some problems until Stevens Point was able to figure some things out, not turn the ball over, and like we talked about, able to finish at the basket. But the coaching adjustments in this game, it was fun for us other coaches watching the game to watch these two guys go at it because they're both great coaches, and it's unfortunate one of them had to lose. I know that's an old cliche, but it was a great semifinal game.
What I found interesting was the coaching adjustment I saw in the second half for Stevens Point was one the Marlins struggled with for a while. That was the backdoor baseline cut. And it would be like they caught the defender sleeping or looking the other way. All of a sudden, backdoor, boom, pass, shot. Backdoor, boom, pass, shot. It happened 3-4 straight times, and the Marlins were lost. Finally, Corey Moore figured it out late in the game and he got a couple steals. But at that point, the lead was already pretty big by their standards.
And I think that's as a direct result of Stevens Point being able to get the ball in the post in the first place and being able to finish. And once they were able to establish that, then Virginia Wesleyan had to adjust and maybe help a little bit or at least peek a little bit at what was going on. And once you peak, Stevens Point was so well coached that they're cutting back door as soon as their defender, loses sight of them, and they were able to get a couple of those cheap baskets. And again, in a game like this that's so tight, a couple breakdowns, a couple cheap baskets are the difference in the game.
How good these defenses were, 29 total turnovers. And it wasn't because the offenses were playing badly and throwing turnovers away. It's that the defenses were forcing turnovers. It's not how you normally look at that number, but I saw that as a defensive number this time around than when we normally look at it as offensive problems.
I agree 100%. I think both defenses were so well prepared for the other team's offense that they were able to anticipate some things and get some turnovers caused by the defense, not necessarily offensive mistakes, and both teams were able to capitalize on that.
Going back to the beginning of the game, the one thing I did see that was interesting was Stevens Point seemed to struggle with Virginia Wesleyan at the start. Into the first media timeout, you could see them not really appreciating how fast Virginia Wesleyan was going to be. They didn't really appreciate how quick they were going to be on defense, especially. And I thought that media timeout, I don't know exactly what Coach Semling changed, but that seemed to be at least the point where the pointers seemed to not wake up, but at least go, okay, we can figure this out.
So my sense of that is that Stevens Point probably doesn't see that type of full court pressure during the regular season and in their region. Virginia Wesleyan is a different type of team for them to play, which is what's great about this national tournament is you get to see different styles go against each other. And I think once Stevens Point's players were able to adjust to the quickness and the defensive pressure of Virginia Wesleyan, they were able to handle it, but it's a process, and luckily it did not take them too long. It only took them till that first media timeout. Then they were able to settle themselves down, be ready for that type of pressure, and then attack it.
Something I talked on the show too. You can watch tape until the sun rises. You can watch it inside, backwards. You can do everything you can with it and break it down in every way possible. But it will never give you the appreciation of speed. It will never give you an appreciation of quickness, and it certainly won't give you an appreciation of determination. And I think both teams struggled with the fact that the tape wasn't revealing what was really the truth, and that was speed, determination, and quickness for both teams.
Yeah, they say video and pictures don't lie, but sometimes they do.
They just don't tell you the whole truth.
And you know, as a coach myself who watches games on the internet, I go back to the first game and I walk into the gym and I was shocked at Augustana and Babson's size. And you just don't see that when you watch those games over the internet. And the same thing can be true as coaches prepare for games. You can't judge aggressiveness. It's hard to judge quickness until you actually go out there and see it. And again, that's why players have to be adjustable and be able to make plays when it counts.
Let's go back to Richard for a minute. The one thing Virginia Wesleyan could not solve, could not find an answer for, could not make a coaching adjustment for, was him. And Poe was the best person to put on him size-wise, but he was making Poe stand still. They put Montgomery on him, and they found other ways to get him the ball. They could not find a solution for Richard, and he feasted off that.
And he's not a tall post player at all, but comparatively, but he has such great footwork. He's able to get some separation inside and finish. And like you said, Dave, over some different attempts by Virginia Wesleyan to switch things up. And again, that's why they're in the national championship game. They've got guys who can do different things at different spots, and they are hard to guard.
You're a former committee member and chair. You know how this bracket gets put together and how difficult things are. Stevens Point is now 7-0 in this building with 3 national championships. Their 4th trip to Salem, they will play for a 4th national championship. There are a lot of banners, 23 of them up on this wall, of teams who have not been able to win when they're in Salem, but they've gotten a national championship. It's fascinating how good the Pointers are and how comfortable they are here in Salem.
They're a great program, without a doubt. They play in obviously a very strong region. I believe we have 2 Central Region teams in the finals tomorrow right now.
Well, thanks to the realignment.
Yeah, that's good work by the NCAA there.
Yeah.
But Steve, obviously, and I think a lot of that you have to give credit to Bob Semling for that, because they come to Salem, they come to this Final Four atmosphere extremely well prepared, and they don't let the moment get to them. And again, I think that's attributable to their coaching staff. Their kids have been here. They probably have an expectation to do well here, and they're not satisfied just getting here. They want to win the thing. And again, it's just a complete program and a pleasure to watch.
Let me ask you this, officiating, 8 officials from 8 different regions coming in here. I kind of like that. From my point of view, in the region I'm in, a year ago, they kind of went away from multiple assigners and went down to 2 basic ones for 5 states. It changed the matchups. It allowed for better officiating because you never get caught into some bad habits because you've worked with the guy for 10 games in the last 2 weeks. I'm exaggerating. I thought there was pretty good officiating to the term of consistency.
I agree.
What was your point?
I agree. I like the change that has been made in terms of officiating, bringing 1 from each region and 2 from one region, because you're going to get good officials. You're not going to go down to your 2nd and 3rd guy and maybe get a weaker official sometimes that I think we may have gotten in the past. And these guys are good officials. They can adjust to working together.
Well, and they work together, too.
Yes, they have. And I think that's key. And you had consistent officiating in both games. I don't think there can be too many complaints about inconsistencies. They did a good job and keeping things under control and keeping things fair, and that's all you can ask. And they worked hard too, and that's all you can ask.
And what I found too was instead, somebody might want to touch foul late in the game. They didn't call at the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
You can't expect them calling it late in the game, and they weren't.
Yep.
Corey Moore drives the lane at the end, puts up an off-balance shot. We saw the replay. There was no contact.
Yeah.
They didn't get baited into things either. I thought it was a pretty solid job.
And you always talk about teams, being able to handle a situation and handle a Final Four environment. Officials have to do the same thing. And I thought the Crews tonight did a very good job of not being baited into this, like you said, into calls, into situations where they're supposed to make calls and anticipate calls. They didn't anticipate calls. They called what they saw, and they did it both ways.
And did several reviews to make sure they had the right shooter, make sure there was the first media timeout. I think we went and checked back on the first shot of the game to make sure it was a 2 or a 3.
Yeah.
They took the time to do that stuff. Let's look ahead quickly to tomorrow. Augustana playing for their first championship, though not the first time they're in this game, of course in Salem the first time.
Yep.
They'll take on Stevens Point, who at this point pretty comfortable, at least coaching staff-wise, and getting them ready to play in this game. What you saw tonight, not that I'm asking for a pick, but how do you see this one breaking down?
Yeah, you're not going to get a pick.
That's fine with me.
I think it's a great matchup. You have in Augustana a team. I was impressed with them tonight from the fact that you're coming off a game where they won by 49 in the sectional championship against a good Marietta team. It's hard to come back and play well after you've played almost perfectly. And they were able to get a 20-point win in the national semifinals.
And that wasn't a 20-point game.
It was not. You're correct. But they were able to beat a top 10 team, coming off a great win. So, kudos to them. They did a great job of getting to the finals. Stevens Point, again, very impressive in how they played at both ends of the floor. I think Stevens Point can, you see some of their scores, they're a little low scoring, but I think they can speed up and play faster if they want to. They just don't have to. And I think it's going to be a great game. I think it's going to be a great matchup, against just two really good teams. I'm really looking forward to this
But
one.
as you said, they're one of the lower scoring offenses here because they don't have to be high scoring.
Yeah.
They can distribute the ball. One other thought about Stevens Point I forgot to get to. Riff has an incredible first half. Misses his first 2 3-pointers of the second half, back iron, and himself shut down and went to the other guys.
Yeah.
Some teams, you don't have that kind of maturity.
Yeah, and then again, that's an impressive thing about him, that he was great in the first half, struggled a little bit the second half, but good basketball players do more than score, and he proved he was a really good basketball player tonight. I think, when you watch Stevens Point, they know when to pass, they know when to shoot, they know when to dribble, they defend like crazy. I mean, they are going to be a tough team to beat. On the other hand, Augustana is the same way. Augustana is big and strong and share the ball very well, maybe a little more athletic than Stevens Point, but that's what's going to make the matchup so good.
Stevens Point just beat a pretty athletic squad in Virginia Wesleyan.
They did.
So they're pretty comfortable with that. Before we let you go, if there were any keys to the game, if there was a key for Stevens Point to be able to pull off a victory over Augustana, or there's a key to the game that Augustana needs to do tomorrow to be able to beat Stevens Point. I know, it's all right. That's why I'm dragging the question out a little bit. I've been coughing all day, just for the record. It's amazing my voice has lasted the time we've been talking. But if there's two keys there for those two teams, what do they have to be?
I think,
it's all right.
Excuse me.
Take your time.
The winning team's going to have to do what they do well, and be able to insert their will on the other team. And the team that's able to do that's going to win.
Now, that's certainly the case, and we saw that tonight, both Augustana and Stevens Point.
Yeah.
At some point, especially in the second half, inserted their will.
Right.
Augustana,
Right.
after withstanding Babson's run and getting a lead, Augustana inserted its will and changed the game. Stevens Point was able to just extend the lead slowly by surely by putting its will in the game and put Virginia Wesleyan in a tough
And
spot.
at some point, the players are going to have to make plays. And then the team that's able to do that and the guys that are able to do that and step up, it's going to be a tight game, and whoever makes the most plays are going to win.
Awesome. Well, I'll let you go on that, sir. Thank you so much for joining me
Thanks
here
for having me.
post-game.
Appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
I'll catch you up soon.
Appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will play it tomorrow, 3:30 Eastern time. Of course, the All-Star game at 12:30. You can just step out, Coach, if you want. Don't need you to keep around. 12:30 Eastern time, of course, for the All-Star game. You can find links to both games on D3Hoops.com. Of course, the championship game will be broadcast on CBS Sports Network. They don't web stream that, so you can go to D3Hoops.com, where Pat Coleman and myself will be on the call for that. The All-Star game, of course, the NABC All-Star game, will be taking place at 12:30. NCAA.com will have a link to that. Get to see 18 pretty darn good seniors from around the country play in that one. Back to this one, we will have Stevens Point versus Augustana. Augustana hasn't been to the championship weekend in well over 20 years and has never been to Salem. They've played, though, for 3 national championships, or 2. This will be their 3rd national championship try. They haven't won any. As for Stevens Point, of course, the Pointers are perfect in Salem. They're 7-0 now. They'll go for an 8th win tomorrow and a 4th national championship. That would tie them with Wisconsin Whitewater, who also has 4, winning their 4th last year, and would be 1 win below the great North Park teams that won 5. On the women's side, we have a battle for the first time ever of undefeated squads. It'll be George Fox versus Thomas More. George Fox with not a lot of names on their squad versus Thomas More, whose name is Sydney Moss, but has a good team around her as well. It's 2 undefeated teams going for a national championship. Believe it or not, as many good national undefeated teams that we've had in Division III, first time ever that they will be faced off and an undefeated team will have to beat an undefeated team for a national title. Sydney Moss, by the way, breaking the great Cheryl Miller's scoring mark in NCAA tournament play. The mark was 177. Sydney Moss has 179 and still has 1 game to play in this season. So they tip off at 7:30 tomorrow night. So your advantage is you can watch the men's game at 3:30 Eastern time, followed by the women's game on NCAA.com at 7:30 Eastern time. Of course, their games being played at Calvin's DeVos Gymnasium on the campus of Calvin College in Grand Rapids. Our Gordon Mann up there covering it all for us. These 2 semifinals were terrific. Its scores may not have been indicative, especially in the first game, of just how good that game was. Babson held its own, made a terrific rally to get the lead, but Augustana finally put its foot down, and Babson didn't have the energy left to get back in it and lost by 20 after Augustana finished the game on a 22-1 run. What's scary about Babson is while they lose 3 seniors, they bring back a lot of talent next year, including Flannery, who's just a sophomore and will learn a lot from this experience. But that sophomore class is pretty good in itself. Virginia Wesleyan, on the other hand, will also lose a lot of seniors. But here's the thing about the Marlins. They always lose seniors, and they're always in the NCAA tournament. 5 straight Sweet 16 appearances for the Marlins. Getting back here for the first time since 2007. You know that the Marlins will retool, not reload. They will retool, and that may cause them to reload, but they're not going to have an off season if Coach Macedo has his way. 2 teams won't face off as a consolation game is certainly a bygone here in Division III men's basketball and replaced by the All-Star game. But Babson and Virginia Wesleyan can leave the Salem Civic Center with their heads held high. Virginia Wesleyan played every single game on the road and gave Stevens Point one heck of a battle down to the end. Babson gave Augustana a pretty good scare. A team that had beaten Marietta by 49 had to gut out a 20-point win. Yeah, I said gut out a 20-point win. That's not that common to hear, but that's because Babson was just that good. Imagine if Wiki actually had an average game. That's not a 20-point game. Augustana doesn't hold double-digit leads, and Babson has a much better outcome. But Wiki had an off night, and as a result, Babson had an off night as well. So tomorrow will be Augustana versus Stevens Point. Augustana going for this first ever national championship, while Stevens Point's looking for title number 4 in just the Salem era. 2 under Jack Bennett. Can it be 2 for Bob Semley? Ray Giovanni would certainly love to give Augustana its first national title. 2 good coaches who certainly know the ins and outs of their teams, and of course a good run in the national tournament. And of course 2 good coaches who also know how to make adjustments, as we saw tonight in these 2 games. Again, 12:30 Eastern time, it'll be the All-Star game. You can find links to that at d3hoops.com, followed by the championship at 3:30. You can watch it on TV on CBS Sports Network. You can listen to it if you want. Pat Coleman and myself calling that game, tip-off schedule for 3:30. Don't forget, again, the women, George Fox versus Thomas More. 1 versus 3. Number 1 Thomas More versus number 3 George Fox. That game tips off at 7:30 Eastern time. Of course, back here, it's number 6 Augustana versus number 8 Stevens Point. For Pat Coleman and everybody else who joined us here on the show, including the head coaches ahead of their games, we want to thank you for tuning in for our pregame and postgame coverage here at d3hoops.com and Hoopsville Courtside. We'll be back on the air with this show at 2:30 Eastern time, 1 hour ahead of the championship game. If you want to interact with us, you can always interact using the hashtag Hoopsville, also hashtag D3H. You can also join us on Twitter at D3Hoopsville, Facebook at facebook.com/Hoopsville, and you can always email us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. Congratulations to George Fox and Thomas More, and also congratulations to Augustana and Stevens Point. It's on to a championship game. Tomorrow night, we'll have 2 champions to crown, and we're looking forward to it right here at d3hoops.com.